Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I know people are joining from all over the place. We'll be a couple of minutes. Still people are coming in. So we'll begin in a couple of minutes. If you have any issues with audio or watching the slides, please raise your hand or send us a chat message. Okay. So thank you all for being here today as we launch our new product called Evolution. So right now there is a big story that everybody hears. The big story is cloud. Everyone is talking about it. And the product we are introducing today is meant not only for the DataFlex market, but we're also targeting the larger development market, Windows development market, specifically C# developers. The challenge is in not being able to make application written in one language to work with another language, one language work with another language is not just common to DataFlex, but it's also for other languages as well. And in this world where we are talking about the cloud, the challenge here is that how do you make your application available over the cloud using multiple protocols? So it's not only just the language challenge you have, but you also have the challenge of being able to support multiple protocols. And Evolution addresses those challenges. So as we talk about the cloud, the big story all over the place is that moving to the cloud or cloud this or cloud that. But there is another side story to that, and that side story is that the Windows development is decreasing. Windows is no longer as important in the development in your development stack as it used to be. And the part of the reason is that we have moved from a PC-centric world to a user-centric world. And what I mean by that is that, just a few years ago, in order to do some work, you had to go and sit down at a PC, log on, and do your work. But now with smartphones and tablets, you can be anywhere and you can still have access to your work. So from our point of view, the world is moving. You can call it a cloud-centric world, but it really is a user-centric world. And there are specific challenges when you want to develop application and deliver application in this user-centric world. So what are the differences that you see in the Windows-centric world and the user-centric world? Well, Windows-centric is local. So you're in a physical time and space sitting in one place. You're in your country. You're localized. Your date, time, and all of that is set to your local zones. Whereas in a global-centric world, in a user-centric world, you could be anywhere in the world and accessing the same system and using the program. Windows-centric was PC only. Right now is any device. You were confined to usually the corporate networks. Now you're talking about cloud computing. In Windows-centric world, any developer could go out there and develop a UI, and it was just functional because you put a spin button there, you do this, you do that, and you have a UI ready. But those kind of things don't really work anymore when you go into the user-centric world where user interface design has to be thought through. It needs to be nice looking, it needs to be sharp, and I'm sure you all have had experiences with mobile applications where the UI, if it was not very good, you didn't want to use it, you went for the sharper, nice-looking UI that made it intuitive and easy to use. The other issue in the Windows-centric world was that OS imposed the security for you. You had all this Windows authentication to deal with, and that's about it. So applications tend to be not as secure. There was pretty loose security in there. But when you're going to the cloud, when you're talking about a user-centric system, application security has to be one of the foremost thoughts in your mind. The other change is that in the Windows-centric world, you could just pick a development tool, write an application, and deploy it on Windows. And you were guaranteed about 90% market share. You didn't care about the rest of the 5–10%. Well, today it's no longer true. You cannot just pick up one development tool and start using it and expect to solve all the problems that you get in the user-centric world. So the goal here is that people are using best-of-breed development tools. There are fancy, nice front-end development tools out there. There are great JavaScript frameworks out there. You have Ruby, Java, C#, all of those for the back end, and you have multiple ways of accessing those. So people want to use different languages and solve their problems using these tools. So evolution is about developing and evolving your Windows application to work well in the user-centric world. This is the problem we are trying to solve. You have a lot of Windows application out there, and they were written in one language, but now you want to adopt another language because that language is more suitable for doing something else, for web development, for middleware development, whatever it is. Well, how do you do that? And that's what evolution tries to address, is going to address. I'm going to give you a demo of what we mean by this. I'm going to switch over to Oliver. Oliver?
Hey, you guys. Okay, so let me get my screen going here. Okay, so you should be seeing a Windows desktop. And what we have here is two different varieties of the order entry application. This one up here is based on C#, and it's meant to work very similar to the standard order entry that we've all seen plenty of times before. I can go in on this record here and in a very Windows style C# way, change the count in there and save that, and just I get my updated total, everything just the way you would expect it. And so this is just a very, very simple small application that we've written to show what an order entry in C# looks like. This one here is a Java-based order entry. Now, of course, we were talking about these Windows applications. These are, of course, Windows applications. But you'll notice here if I go forward and backwards through here, what I had done was I updated the number of these run meters to 3, the runner's pulsometer. And you'll notice I'm accessing the same database in this case. My run meter has been updated to 3 in this case. Very simple little application. And we've got various views that are in here for customer entry and things like that that are very similar to what you would see in a DataFlex application. In addition to these applications, the other one I wanted to show you fits a little bit better with what Ria's talking about from the standpoint of these very user-centric designed user interfaces. So this is also the order entry application served in a web environment, and we are accessing, again, the same database here. This is an application that's meant to scale down to tablet size, so we switch to a different sort of UI here when we go down to a tablet size, and you can see it's a very usable, fast application that is very modern looking as well. But there's something these applications all share together, and I'll let Riaz go into that part of it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Oliver, thank you. So what you saw was a Java application, a C# application, and an Angular application. And what is common to all these? Well, they're all using DataFlex. Even though the front end is developed in C#, Java, and Angular, and it's accessing the back-end database, but the business rules are stored in DataFlex, data dictionaries. And that's a big deal because now you're able to take your application that is not open, but you can make it available to other languages to consume those business rules. And this is just one example. We have an example of Python with C# also that we will talk about that doesn't involve DataFlex, but since most of the audience here is DataFlex user, we thought it'd be better to talk about DataFlex. So how did we do all of this thing? So what we did is we used APIs, the concept of application programming interface. In this world, where user-centric world, where UI could be on many devices, you need to be able to develop the UI in a way that works across all those devices. And the techniques are different. They're no longer the same techniques you used to use when you developed in Windows. So the best way to do this is to think of your application or the heart of your application as APIs. And this is not something that's emphasized very often. I mean, if you're you're C developers, they're used to seeing SDKs and APIs and whatnot. But business application developers didn't think like this. And what we're saying is that you need to think like that. So using APIs made it independent of the UI. Then we exposed this DataFlex function using Evolution, so they could be called from other languages. And you saw that being called from 3 different languages: C#, Java, and Angular, which is JavaScript. But we have an example with Python, and you could do it with any other language as well. And then what we did was we served those APIs using binary and JSON protocols. So the binary protocol, which is the C# and Java, did not require any web server. It is just binary protocol using raw TCP. And JSON was served using Apache. So right now we're introducing a new mix to this, that you can call these APIs now from many different languages, and you can serve them with different web servers and use different protocols. And this really is the heart of what Evolution is about. So our vision of Evolution is this: that you have different languages written, your applications written in different languages, and what you do is you build a common API. So whether it's a DataFlex application or a C# application or a VB app or any other Windows application, and what you can do now is build a common API over this, and then Evolution will let you serve those APIs with multiple protocols. So whether it's JSON, RPC, or XML, SOAP, binary, all these protocols Evolution will support. And then if you're developing application for the mobile world, you're developing application for the browser or the desktop, it doesn't matter. You pick the right protocol, and then the language you want to build in, and then you go ahead and start using these APIs. And this is really powerful. And this is one of the key selling points for Evolution for all Windows developers, not just DataFlex. We're talking about C# and Java, who constantly struggle with trying to provide support for multiple protocols. And this problem of cross-language development is something that's very real. And that's why Google and Facebook and Microsoft all have invested money in this to support this kind of development. So one thing we're going to show you is this common API is an example. If you guys can go to evolution.mertechdata.com, I'm going to hand over to Oliver again to show the demo. Oliver?
Okay, so if we just go back to the same demo we were looking at before of the Angular application, one of the things that we can take a look at if we click on this little button up in here, you'll see that we actually have a way that you can see some of the code that's being called for some of the calls. So the example we have in this case is to get a page of orders. And you'll see here we have a JSON RPC call being done to get a page of orders. And then just to illustrate, this is what some of the DataFlex code to handle this looks like. So it's very simple here. But because we're using Evolution in here, this API can be exposed from multiple programming languages on the server side easily. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this switch up here. And you'll notice it says C#. My call on the top is identical to what it was before, but you'll notice that instead of calling into DataFlex code, in this case, I'm natively calling C# code that exposes an identical usable interface. And in fact, in this case, we're using the same back-end database even. So now the application is running in C# mode. If I come in here or go to orders here and take a look at my order, the whole user interface works exactly as it worked before, except we're dealing with a C# application instead. So I can go down here, I can save it, and I can switch back to DataFlex, go back to our list of orders, go in here, and now running on DataFlex, you can see the updated total. Just flipping a switch changes the entire API that's being used for every single call. Now, from the client, we stay the same. We just switch the folder that we're accessing to be the C# version of the server. Basically, we switch to that piece, and you can see here we have a C# version of a find order in this case. So Evolution is in this case allowing us to expose an identical API to this application that is so compatible that we can simply flick a switch.
Okay. Thank you, Oliver. So you guys can go ahead and go visit evolution.mertechdata.com. You'll be able to play around with it and take a look at the source code and whatnot. So here's the Evolution architecture. How are we doing all of this? So the first thing is that you have all these different languages, whether it's a DataFlex or C# or VB or any other Windows tool that can use COM. Evolution will work with that. So Evolution is based on a COM interface. It is just like you would use any other COM component. We are not doing anything separate as a separate process or anything, but this is a COM component. So we are using COM to communicate in and out of your program. On top of the COM interface, which sits with the program, we have the Evolution dispatcher, which communicates with your protocol request and decides how to route that call. So you could have multiple, whichever application you're running, it will route it to that. So that's what the dispatcher does. And then on top of the dispatcher is built these different protocol layers. So JSON RPC, SOAP, binary, XML RPC, all of these are compact. These are different protocols that are suited for different needs, which sits on top of the dispatcher. And then the dispatcher communicates to the other language using HTTP or socket transports. So in short, this architecture, even though it looks like a very complex architecture, it's actually very small and just total is about 5 megabytes. The technology that we built is not something we reinvented the wheel. We didn't have to. Google and Facebook have invested a lot of time and money in developing cross-language support and cross-language development. And we chose one of those technologies, and the technology that we're using is called Thrift, which is by Facebook, which they donated to the Apache Foundation, so it's called now Apache Thrift. And a lot of the underlying pieces for doing cross-language development is already there. But there are missing pieces. Ability to support multiple protocol is one of them, and the ability to work with other languages seamlessly through COM is another one that we added to all of those things. So we are trying to just take it forward with what's out there and filling the gaps and addressing the needs of the market. And so this architecture is what Evolution works with. So in short, what is Evolution? Evolution lets applications developed in different languages communicate with each other. I think we showed that. You had a DataFlex application. You can turn this around. It could be a C# application, and I could have gone into it through Java. I could have gone into it from Python. I could have gone into it from Angular, the same way. But it lets you talk to each other. And it does it by building a common API. So yes, there is some work involved. It's not a simple drop-in solution. You have to think about the architecture of your application, but it is a much smaller step to turn your application into an API than to rewrite your entire application to support multiple things. So the idea is that you build these APIs, you think APIs, and once you do that, you have the freedom to do other things with your application. And then these APIs can be served either through a web server or without a web server, and that's a key point. That in other markets outside of DataFlex, you can access any function in a program through just the native communication protocol. You don't need a web server for that. So the key here is that if you're going to call into a C# application from Java, well, you will use a binary protocol, which one of the protocols that doesn't require a web server. But if you want to serve the same API over the web for other purposes using HTTP, well, then you'll use a web server. And Evolution has support for Apache and IIS or any other web servers that if you're looking into Nginx as one of the possibilities, but it will have multiple support for that. So basically, you're free to choose the development language you want to work with, and you are free to use the protocol you want to use, and you're free to use the web server you want to use. So this, in summary, is what Evolution is all about. So Evolution is fast, and we'll show you a demo in a couple of minutes on how fast it is. It is easy to deploy, just a couple of DLLs. It has very small footprint. The total Evolution package is about 5 megabytes, and works with Apache and IIS both. So let me show you. Let me transfer you back to Oliver, and he'll show you some performance numbers that we're seeing.
So for this piece of it, to give us just a point of reference, we're going to do a very simple API call that simply adds two numbers together. Now, this is a test that we do to kind of test the interface's speed rather than necessarily the speed of the underlying product or anything like that. It tests how fast we're running. So our first test that we have here is a test that's essentially using just web app without Evolution, and it's doing a JSON-based call in here. And so in this case, we have 4 clients that are attempting to do 3,000 calls each for a total of 12,000 calls to the server. And while this test is running, the other 2 tests that we're going to show, I'll just describe those while this one's running. There we go. Okay, so we completed 32 seconds to do those 12,000 calls. Not bad, pretty fast. The next one we're going to show is an Evolution connection to DataFlex in this case, and it's running the exact same test, except it's using one of our binary protocols. It's still going over network connection, and so let's go ahead and run this one, 12,000 total calls, and we're done. Evolution is very fast as a transport interface. You can see we completed 12,000 calls in the longest time it took was 1.376 seconds. It's an exceedingly fast interface to use this way. And in fact, let's run the tests against C# as well. And so this is, now in this case, we're accessing all of these from Python. So in the first case, it was Python using JSON to just a standard web app. The second case was Python to Evolution using our binary protocol. And in this third case, it's Python to a C# Evolution server using the binary protocol. And as you can see, not quite as fast as the DataFlex one, but in that same range, within just a few % of each other. So we've got this exceedingly fast interface available here that's very easy to use.
So Oliver, you want to make this clear that the Python C# app doesn't have DataFlex. We are calling directly into C# from Python using Evolution.
Correct. Correct. This is Python communicating with an Evolution server that is backed by a C# application directly. There's no DataFlex in the mix on this one.
Okay. Okay, thank you. All right, so the way we look at it is that Evolution to us is two products, two different types of products, and that's kind of that's just kind of the way we are going to go, depending on the protocol you're using. Evolution would be a web API server, so we think of Evolution as more of an API server. And API management is getting a lot of coverage nowadays because exceedingly companies like SAP, Oracle, all of these people are serving up their application cores as APIs. And I think that's a market that we want to focus on. So a web API server will serve APIs over HTTP using Apache or IIS or whatever web server you might want to use. It will support JSON, and we are working on adding support for SOAP and XML RPC. So by the time we release the product, we will have these multiple protocols supported. Now, it's very important to point out that not many tools out there allow you to work and swap out protocols with just one interface. All right, and so that's a key. If you're not doing those kind of work, you might not appreciate the challenge in that, but it is a big challenge for developers out there, and that's why we want to do this. The Evolution Object Server will be something which will serve API using binary protocols, so this is more about language-to-language connection, and is great for integrating desktop applications with each together. So that to you is an overview of what Evolution is, and that's how we view it. That's what we see the market, and that's the market we're going to pursue. Now, there are challenges, we are all participating in the DataFlex market, and there are challenges in the DataFlex market, and this is purely based on market dynamics. Nobody can deny the fact that our developer base is getting older. If you go to any of the conferences, that's one of the common things you see. I've been seeing people for 20 years. We don't see many new people coming into the market. So there is a big challenge in the market, is that how do you replace those developers? If you are an ISV or if you have a serious commitment to DataFlex, you know how difficult it is for you to find DataFlex developers. And it's very hard because new programmers do not want to learn an obscure language. That's the way it is. That's the reality of us. I mean, and that's a big challenge for us, and it's a big threat to the businesses. So that part is a serious challenge in the market. And sooner or later, as we meet, like at the last DISD, I met at least 4 or 5 developers who were retiring or were going to retire this year. That was about 8 to 10% of the attendees. So that's if you think about it, that if you're going to continue with this rate of attrition, you won't have many developers left to develop in DataFlex. So what are you going to do about the applications that you are developing for your customers or the vertical market application you're selling? Serious threat to you. The other part is that because of these products, the market is shrinking. It's a given. I mean, I've been associated with this market for over 20 years. And, we all understand this market is not going to grow too much. And so the pie is getting smaller. And, companies like us who provide solution to this market have to think about where this market is going to go in 5 years, and do we want to position ourselves to be to be harmed by these kind of market trends. So the shrinking market share doesn't help anybody. And the third final challenge that we see is just because there is no brand recognition, new developers will not come and you start using this language. There is no pixie dust. It is what it is. People have mind share. People coming out of schools use different languages. You cannot convert them regardless of how good you think your language is. So the lack of brand recognition means that, again, the same problem. You will have a serious skills shortage in the market. And I think that we can address that. And we can address that with openness. And what that means is that, in our view, that if you open up the language and you have a challenge, if you want to do something, you can bring in new developers who are skilled in other programming languages and who can help you to further your application and your program without having to teach them another language. You can bring a very good C# developer and he can do something for you great in a very short period of time and still work with your DataFlex application. And I think that this openness is something that we need to think about collectively as a market. Because if you're not going to do that, writing is on the wall, we are going to have a slow attrition, the market is not going to fantastically change overnight and become huge, and every company has to think about this. And this is not something, I'm just saying, what I hear and I have a conversation with developers in the market. So we have to address these challenges. Openness doesn't kill the product. Openness prolongs the life of the product. We saw that with the database drivers when we introduced the drivers in late 90s. Everybody was saying, well, we don't need anything else, and this is the way to get people out of DataFlex. No, it actually kept a lot of ISVs in the DataFlex market, where now SQL is kind of the de facto standard. And I think that we need to have this kind of a quantum leap in thinking of where we want to take this product and where it has to go. I'm not ready to go and retire with the rest of the developers. I still am young enough to work, but I think that the market will benefit greatly by being open and not putting hurdles on them. It will make it much more solid and much more viable in the long run for people to continue to use DataFlex. So what is our view of evolution and DataFlex? So this is how we see evolution and DataFlex together. It is open from any language. You can call into your DataFlex objects, DD objects. So basically, your DataFlex program becomes, a business rule server for you. If you want to use DataFlex for rapid application development, great. If you're productive in it, great. Nobody's stopping you from doing that. It still is a great tool. I mean, you have one or two people supporting DataFlex, large DataFlex applications in some companies. But here's the problem with that. What happens when those two people retire? And this is a story we hear all the time. Where are you going to find a replacement for that? So the key here is that if you're open enough, you can start using those development tools and bring it to the fold and sustain your application over the long run. The other side is that right now you have a tie-in with IIS and web app, just Windows. Well, that also is a limitation because most of the open world or the user-centric world is driven by open source. So with Evolution, you would be able to run your front-end development and run it on Linux and still communicate to your Windows backend running DataFlex like anything else. So you can build scalable solutions for the cloud completely on the open source stack, yet keep DataFlex in the mix. This is a completely new story. I mean, it could be a new direction for DataFlex in trying to position it as a business rules engine development tool. But that's too far out. But main thing here right now is that we have an immediate challenge in the market, and we want to address that. So our goal is that we want to preserve what is in the market, not change drastically too much, open it up, so there is a lot more benefit to the wider market and not just a slow attrition to nothingness. We want to make sure that the investment that I have made in this company, in this market, the investment that you have made in this market is sustained over a period of time. I see warning signs all over the place. Well, we're doing something about it. So in the DataFlex context, for us, it's very important that we prolong the life of DataFlex in the market and not let it die off. There are quite a few people on this forum today, I recognize the names, where they were completely taken out of the loop when the DataFlex system was replaced. They were not even asked after spending 20, 30 years on their application because the new manager doesn't want to deal with it because they couldn't find resources to maintain it. They didn't want to risk it. So think about these things. I mean, these are constructive things. You have to think about disruption to evolve and to go to the next stage. And that's how we view DataFlex. But anyway, outside of the DataFlex market, well, like I mentioned, we are looking at it as the two different products of Evolution Web API Server and Object Server. Then we might have some language-specific base. We're still packs that we are still trying to figure out. But we might have, say, for example, you're working with C#, and that will be a language-specific pack for you. And we will go with a more per-server pricing, not a per-user pricing. So what that means is that we think that, because of the wider market that we are serving, not just the DataFlex, but the C# market and all of that, the economy of scale will kick in, and we should be able to price in a very attractive way where it makes it very feasible for you to use the product. Whether you're C# or Java or whatever developer, we think that that market will go for that kind of pricing option. And we will have OEM options available like we have for any of our products. So, in conclusion, Evolution is basically an API server. It works with or without a web server depending on your needs. It will It's designed primarily to allow languages to talk to each other. So basically cross-language development. It supports multiple protocols, so whether you want to use HTTP and want to serve your APIs over the web, it's built into that. If you want to use JSON, XML, or SOAP, well, it's built into that. But if you want to use it with desktop integration, we have binary protocols that does not require web applications, web servers to communicate with your APIs. And it enables you to build solid cloud-based applications using best-of-breed technologies. So right now in the market, there are a lot of very good JavaScript development frameworks out there. The example we showed is built on Angular. That's what we use most of the time with our projects. And we are able to find developers who know this already. So for us, what we have found is that even these new developers, when they have a problem, they can go out there, search, and within 2 minutes they have an answer. There are tons of modules written out there that we can take on and use. And that's the key, that you're able to do your work without facing hurdles. You don't have to jump through hoops to get things done. And that's what Evolution will do for developers. Now, Evolution is available in beta. I think there are a couple of features we are still implementing, but if you're interested in trying it out, send me an email or Oliver. Our emails are there. And let us know, and we'll add you to our list. And finally, we will have a follow-up webinar on October 23rd at 12 p.m., 11 or 12. I think we want to try to make it more Aussie-friendly, I think, which is Evolution in Depth, Programming with Evolution. So we will talk about different languages, how you use it with Evolution. And we have a lot of customers who are non-DataFlex users using our B3 products, who have Windows development using all kinds of languages, whether it's Delphi, Java, even COBOL. So we expect a very healthy participation from those folks as well, where we are talking about these cross-language development challenges. So that's it from my side.